You know what's funny about life-changing moments? They creep up on you on the most ordinary days. For me, it was a Tuesday. Just another Tuesday in my 30 years of marriage to Linda, working the same job at the factory, living the same comfortable routine we'd built together. I remember that morning perfectly. Linda kissed me goodbye, her coffee breath familiar and warm, her perfume lingering in the air as she grabbed her purse. "Don't wait up, honey. Big meeting today. Might run late." I nodded just like I had 100 times before. Routine, right? 30 years. 3 decades of building a life together, raising our kids, planning vacations, sharing dreams. I was that guy who'd show up at work with homemade lunches Linda packed, bragging about her cooking to the guys. "You're one lucky bastard, Tom," they'd say. And I was. The American dream. Decent job, loving wife, kids in college, a house we'd almost paid off. Everything by the book. Some folks call me old-fashioned. Hell, maybe I am. I'm not the type to check phones or track locations or any of that modern spy stuff. Trust was always our thing. Simple as that. When Linda said she had meetings, she had meetings. When she started having more of them these past couple months, well, that's what happens when you're good at your job, right? I never thought much about the little changes, the new perfume, the gym membership she suddenly remembered to use, the work calls during dinner. That's what marriage is. People grow, change, evolve. At least that's what I kept telling myself. But here's the thing about trust. It's like one of those support beams we install at the factory. Looks solid, reliable, been holding up the whole structure for years. Then one day, you notice a tiny crack. Most guys would probably ignore it, convince themselves it's nothing. But in my line of work, you learn that tiny cracks can bring down entire buildings. I never planned to leave work early that Tuesday. Funny how fate works sometimes. A broken machine, a canceled shift, and suddenly I'm driving home at 2 p.m. instead of 6. Taking a different route because of road work. Just another random Tuesday throwing a wrench in the routine. That's when I saw it. Linda's silver Camry, parked outside a house I'd never seen before, in a neighborhood she had no business being in. A house that definitely wasn't her office building where she was supposed to be in a big meeting. Sometimes a tiny crack is just a tiny crack, and sometimes it's the first sign that your whole world is about to come crashing down. I sat there in my truck, staring at her car, feeling something shift inside me. Not rage, not yet. Just this cold, clear certainty that everything I thought I knew was about to change. "Well," I said to myself, gripping the steering wheel, "this should be interesting. I've never been the guy who makes scenes. 30 years working with heavy machinery teaches you that rushing into things gets people hurt. So I did what I do best. I waited. 40 minutes. That's how long I sat in my truck, engine off, watching her car like some budget private investigator. Every minute felt like an hour, my mind racing through every possible explanation. Maybe it was a client's house. Maybe she was helping someone with their taxes. Maybe... Then I saw them. Linda came out first, laughing at something I couldn't hear. She looked happy, that relaxed, unguarded kind of happy I hadn't seen in months. Then he appeared. Tall guy, probably early 50s, wearing jeans and a Cubs t-shirt that had seen better days. Definitely not office attire. Definitely not a big meeting. My hands started shaking when he touched her shoulder, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into it, comfortable, familiar. Like they'd done this 100 times before. I grabbed my phone and took some pictures, feeling like a creep, but knowing I needed proof. Not for others, for myself. Because part of me still wanted to believe there was an explanation. The guy walked her to her car, said something that made her laugh again. She checked her phone, probably looking at the time, realizing she needed to head home soon. Keep up the routine, keep the lie going. As they said goodbye, there was this moment, just a split second, where they looked around before she got in her car. That's what got me. That quick check for witnesses told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't innocent, this wasn't professional, this was practiced routine. I watched her drive away, then stayed a bit longer, staring at the house where my wife had just spent 2 hours not being at work. Plain two-story place, white with blue shutters. American dream kind of house, the kind of house where other people's wives go to cheat on their husbands. My phone buzzed. Text from Linda. Meeting running late. Don't wait up for dinner. I looked at the message, then at the pictures I'd just taken. 30 years of trust lying right there in my hand. Sure thing, honey, I typed back. Take your time. Then I started my truck and headed home, already planning my next move, because if Linda wanted to play this game, well, she was about to learn she wasn't the only one who could keep secrets. Never thought I'd spend my lunch break Googling how to be a detective, but there I was, hiding in my truck with a sandwich I couldn't eat, learning about reverse image searches and property records. Turns out finding people isn't that hard these days. The internet's funny like that. 30 seconds of typing, and suddenly I had a name, Harry Reynolds, owner of some auto parts store across town. I scrolled through his business website, staring at his photo. Professional headshot, big smile, wedding ring conspicuously absent. The kind of guy who probably calls himself an entrepreneur at parties. The kind of guy who apparently had 2-hour meetings with my wife. That night I watched Linda move around our kitchen, humming while she made dinner. Same routine we'd had forever. She'd cook, I'd wash dishes, we'd talk about our day. Except now everything felt like a performance. "How was your meeting?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Oh, you know," she stirred the pasta sauce, not looking at me. "Budget reviews, quarterly projections, boring stuff." I nodded, wondering how many dinners we'd spent like this, her spinning stories while I swallowed them whole. "Sounds rough," I said, and she launched into some complicated tale about spreadsheets and client presentations. I let her talk, noting how easily the lies came, how natural, like watching a pro at work. Meanwhile, my phone felt heavy in my pocket, those pictures burning a hole right through it. Later, I lay awake, listening to her breathe beside me. 30 years of marriage, and suddenly the woman next to me was a stranger. Every memory started feeling tainted. Our anniversary dinner last month. Had she been seeing him then? Christmas with the kids. Was she thinking about him? Those late-night texts she'd smile at. How long had they been playing me for a fool? The worst part wasn't the anger. It was this creeping numbness, like watching your life turn into some bad TV movie. Part of me wanted to shake her awake, demand answers, throw those pictures in her face. But that's not how you win this kind of game. No, if Linda wanted to play director in this little drama of hers, she was about to learn that even supporting actors can steal the show. I had some ideas about a grand finale she wouldn't see coming. First, though, I needed to do some more research, because Harry Reynolds wasn't the only one who could run a business, and tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day at his auto parts store. Harry Reynolds' auto parts store was exactly what I expected, one of those clean, modern places with a fancy coffee machine in the waiting area. I watched from across the street as he moved around inside, chatting with customers, playing the successful businessman. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles went white. That's when it hit me. The perfect plan. See, our 30th anniversary was coming up next week. Linda had been dropping hints about celebrating, probably feeling guilty enough to want some public display of our perfect marriage. Well, she was about to get her wish, just not the way she imagined. I spent my afternoon break making calls. First to our kids, "Hey, want to help surprise your mom for our anniversary?" Then friends, neighbors, even some of her work colleagues. Everyone loved the idea of a surprise party. Linda always said I wasn't romantic enough. Time to prove her wrong. The real surprise came that evening. I told her I was working late, but instead parked down the street from Reynolds' house. Like clockwork, her car pulled up at 2:30. 2 hours later, she emerged, fixing her hair in that way she always does after... I couldn't finish that thought. My stomach lurched, and for a moment I thought I might be sick. I followed her to a grocery store, watched her buy ingredients for dinner, her alibi for being late. Professional liar now, my Linda. As she drove home, I pulled over and threw up on the side of the road. 30 years of memories came up with the bile. But as I wiped my mouth, something hardened inside me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice, about truth, about making sure everyone saw who she really was. I drove home, walked in just as she was starting dinner. Traffic was horrible, she said, not meeting my eyes. Had to stop for groceries, too. No problem, I smiled, thinking about the party invitations I'd already sent. Hey, you're not planning anything big for our anniversary, right? I was thinking we could just have a quiet dinner at home. She looked relieved. That sounds perfect, honey. Perfect. Yeah, it was going to be perfect, all right. Just not in the way she thought. Because while Linda was planning her next meeting, I was planning something too, and only one of us was going to like how this story ended. Planning the perfect party is harder than you'd think, especially when you're trying to destroy someone's life. Every detail matters. The guest list became my obsession. I wanted witnesses, but not just any witnesses. I wanted people who mattered. Our kids were first on the list, of course. Jenny, our daughter, sounded excited on the phone. Dad, this is so sweet. Mom's going to love it. If she only knew. Then Mark, our son, offering to fly in from Chicago. I wouldn't miss it, Dad. It's not every day your parents hit 30 years. The guilt nearly made me call it off. Nearly. But then I'd remember those pictures on my phone. Linda's car outside that house, her laughing with him, the casual touches, the practiced lies. And suddenly the guilt would transform into something colder, more purposeful. I invited her closest friends, Sarah and Bill, who'd been at our wedding, Jessica from her book club, Mike and Karen from our neighborhood cookouts, people who thought they knew us, knew her, people whose opinions mattered to Linda more than she'd ever admit. The trickiest part was her work colleagues. I needed them there. They were part of her alibi, after all. I called her office, speaking to Janet, her closest work friend. It's a surprise anniversary party, I explained, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. Think you could get some of the team to come? Of course, Janet gushed. We'll be there. Though, Linda mentioned a big client meeting that afternoon. Should I tell her to reschedule? No, I said, gripping the phone tighter. Let her keep her meeting. Just make sure everyone shows up by 6. The next few days were a masterclass in acting. I'd kiss Linda goodbye in the morning, tell her to have a good day at work, then spend my lunch breaks planning her downfall. I ordered catering, her favorite foods, because why not make it perfect? Bought decorations, including a big Happy 30th Anniversary banner that felt like it was mocking me every time I looked at it. I even went to the jeweler's, bought her a diamond necklace. The saleswoman called me such a romantic husband. I smiled, paid, and spent the drive home imagining Linda's face when she realized what was really coming. The hardest part was the waiting. Watching her continue her routine, her lies becoming more elaborate as the day approached. Honey, I might be late next Thursday. Big presentation to prepare for. Thursday, the day of our anniversary, the day of her usual meeting with Harry. I just nodded, said I understood. And I did understand more than she knew. I started having trouble sleeping, would lie there at night, listening to her breathe, wondering how many times she'd come home from his house and slipped into our bed. Wondering if she ever felt guilty, or if she was just too good at compartmentalizing now. The woman I'd spent 3 decades with had become a stranger, wearing my wife's face. The RSVPs started rolling in. Everyone was coming, friends, family, colleagues. Linda's entire world would be there to witness the moment her carefully constructed lies came crashing down. I stored their cheerful responses in a special folder on my phone right next to the pictures of her car outside Harry's house. 3 days before the party, I drove past his place again. They were there, of course. Same routine, same time window, same casual goodbye touches. But this time, I didn't feel sick, didn't even feel angry anymore. Just felt this cold, clear certainty that justice was coming. That sometimes the best revenge isn't served hot and fast, but cold and calculated with an audience. I spent that evening helping Linda plan what she thought would be our quiet anniversary dinner at home. She suggested cooking my favorite meal. I told her that sounded perfect, and it did. Because every lie she added to the pile just made what was coming feel more justified, more necessary. The stage was set. The actors were ready. All that remained was the final act, and I had a feeling it was going to bring the house down. The day before our anniversary, I watched Linda pack her gym bag for work. She'd started doing that months ago, bringing workout clothes to exercise after the office. Funny how obvious the lies become once you know where to look. The diamond necklace sat in my truck's glove compartment, next to the printed photos and a USB drive containing everything I documented over the past weeks. Evidence. That's what the divorce lawyers would call it later. Right now, it just felt like pieces of my life, stored away in a dark space, waiting to explode. I spent my morning at work going through the motions, checking my phone every few minutes. Messages kept coming in, confirmations from guests, questions about parking, what time to arrive. Each one felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. Jenny called around lunch. "Dad, I'm catching an earlier flight. Mark's picking me up from the airport. We thought maybe we could help you set up?" I gripped the phone harder. "Actually, honey, I've got it covered. Just make sure you're there by 6, okay?" "Everything all right, Dad? You sound different." "Just nervous about the surprise," I lied, wondering if this was how Linda felt every time she deceived me, if lying got easier with practice. "You know your mom. She's hard to surprise." "She'll love it," Jenny assured me. "I mean, who doesn't love a surprise party?" After hanging up, I sat in my truck, staring at nothing. Tomorrow, our kids would watch their mother's life fall apart. Tomorrow, the woman they'd looked up to their whole lives would be exposed as a liar. Was I wrong to involve them? Should I have kept this private, dealt with it quietly? But then I remembered Linda's text from this morning. "Can't wait for our special dinner tomorrow, honey. Just us, like you wanted." Even now, planning to meet her lover on our anniversary, she was still playing the devoted wife, still taking me for a fool. The afternoon dragged on. I left work early, telling my supervisor I needed to prep for the anniversary surprise. He clapped me on the back, called me a lucky man. I managed not to laugh. At home, I went through my mental checklist one last time. Catering confirmed for 5:30. Decorations hidden in the garage. Guest arrival time set for 6 o'clock. Linda's usual meeting time was 2:30 to 4:30. Plenty of time for her to come home, shower, change, and walk into her own surprise party. And my surprise for her. I'd arranged the living room furniture to face the entryway. Wanted everyone to have a good view when it all went down. The banner, that damn Happy 30th Anniversary banner, was folded neatly in a box, waiting to be hung. 30 years. 3 decades of memories about to be rewritten in a single evening. Linda came home late, full of enthusiasm about our quiet dinner tomorrow. She'd even bought wine, expensive stuff, probably trying to ease her conscience. We sat on the couch, her head on my shoulder, like old times watching some mindless TV show. Her phone buzzed. She checked it casually, angled away from me. "Janet from work," she said, typing a quick response. "Finalizing tomorrow's presentation." I watched her lie straight to my face, knowing that somewhere across town, Harry Reynolds was probably planning his own schedule for tomorrow, planning to spend my anniversary with my wife. "Love you," she said later, kissing me goodnight. "Love you too," I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I lay awake long after she fell asleep, thinking about time. 30 years of marriage ending in a single day. Countless memories about to be tainted forever. But maybe that's how it always ends. Not with a bang, but with a quiet night before the storm. Watching your wife sleep beside you for the last time, waiting for tomorrow to destroy everything. Anniversary morning. Linda woke up early, made us coffee, wearing that blue silk robe I got her last Christmas. She was extra affectionate. Guilt does that to people, I guess. Kissed me longer than usual before heading out. "See you tonight, honey. Can't wait for our dinner." I waited until her car disappeared around the corner before starting. The caterers would arrive at 5:30, but I had other preparations first. I hung the banner, arranged the furniture one last time, set up a small table for the photos, and my laptop. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be ready. Jenny called around noon. "Dad, we just landed. Mark's flight got in too. Want us to pick up anything?" "No, sweetie, just ... I hesitated. "Just be there at 6, okay? And I love you both. Remember that?" "Dad, you're being weird. Are you sure everything's okay?" "It will be," I said, and hung up before she could hear the shake in my voice. At 2:15, I drove to Harry's neighborhood, parked where I could see his driveway. Linda's car pulled up right on schedule, 2:30, perfect timing for her presentation prep. I took more pictures, even though I already had plenty. Something about documenting this last betrayal felt important. My phone kept buzzing with messages from guests. Everyone was excited about the surprise party, if they only knew what kind of surprise was really coming. Janet from Linda's office texted, "Got everyone from work confirmed. Linda has no idea." No, Linda had no idea at all. The caterers arrived at 5:30 sharp. I directed them mechanically, watching the clock. Linda was still at Harry's, still living her other life, probably planning to rush home, shower, change, play the loving wife for our quiet dinner. At 5:45, guests started arriving. Jenny and Mark first, helping arrange food and drinks. Our daughter kept looking at me strangely. Maybe she sensed something wasn't right. Mark was easier to fool, busy catching up with old neighbors as they arrived. By 5:50, the house was filling up. Friends, family, colleagues, Linda's whole world gathered in one room. Sarah and Bill brought champagne. "For the toast," Sarah said, winking. Jessica from book club arranged flowers. Mike and Karen set up their camera to capture the moment. 5:55. Still no sign of Linda. The guests talked in hushed, excited whispers. Jenny kept checking her watch, then looking at me. I stood by the table where my laptop waited, fingers brushing against the USB drive in my pocket. At 6 o'clock, I checked my phone's tracking app one last time. Linda's car was still at Harry's. Time for the first move. I typed out a message. "Running late at the office, honey? Everyone's waiting for you at home." 3 dots appeared immediately. She was typing, then stopping, then typing again. Finally, "What do you mean, everyone?" I sent her the first photo, her car outside Harry's house. "Maybe you could wrap up your presentation and join us? The guests are getting hungry." No response this time, but 2 minutes later, the tracking app showed her car starting to move. Showtime. I gathered everyone in the living room, made sure they were facing the entry, made sure Linda's work colleagues had a clear view. They'd be key witnesses to her lies. The diamond necklace box sat wrapped on the side table, a final touch of irony. Jenny touched my arm. "Dad, what's going on? You're scaring me." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, wondering if this was the last time she'd see me as just her father, before I became the man who destroyed her mother's reputation. "Sometimes," I said quietly, "the truth needs an audience." The sound of a car pulling into our driveway silenced the room. Footsteps on the porch, a key in the lock. I took a deep breath and positioned myself by the laptop. 30 years of marriage were about to end in the next few minutes. But first, Linda was going to learn an important lesson about surprises. The door opened slowly. Linda stepped in, still wearing her work clothes, hair slightly messed up, probably from rushing home. She froze when she saw the crowd, her eyes widening in that practiced look of surprise I'd seen so many times before. "Surprise!" everyone shouted, everyone except me. For a moment, the scene played out like a normal surprise party. People laughing, Linda putting her hand to her chest in mock shock, smiling that perfect smile of hers. Then her eyes found me, standing by the laptop. Her smile flickered just slightly. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but I'd been studying her lies for weeks now. "Oh my God," she said, playing her part perfectly. "I can't believe you did this." I stepped forward, champagne glass in hand. The room quieted down, expecting a loving husband's anniversary toast. Jenny was beaming. Mark looked proud. Linda's work colleagues clustered together, some still in their office clothes, their big presentation outfits. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "to my wife of 30 years, to the woman who's shared my life, raised my children, and kept so many secrets." The room's energy shifted. Linda's smile froze. "Honey?" She started, but I continued. "You see, Linda's been very busy lately. Lots of late meetings, important presentations." I turned to her colleagues. "In fact, wasn't there supposed to be a big client meeting today, Janet?" Janet looked confused. "What? No, we didn't have any." That's what I thought. I set down my glass and picked up the laptop remote. So I got curious about these meetings, started doing some research. And you know what's funny about modern technology? It keeps tracks of things, like where your car goes, what time you arrive places, who owns certain houses. The room was dead silent now. Linda had gone pale, her purse clutched tight against her chest like a shield. "Tom," she said quietly, "please don't." "Don't what?" "Don't show everyone the truth? Don't expose how you've been spending our anniversary afternoons?" I clicked the remote. The first photo appeared on the laptop screen, projected large on the wall we'd cleared for the anniversary slideshow. Linda's car outside Harry's house. Time stamp clear as day. "That's—" Linda started, but I clicked again. More photos. Her and Harry in his driveway, their goodbye touches, their careful looks around before parting. "Mom?" Jenny's voice cracked. "What is this?" "It's nothing," Linda said quickly. "It's not what it looks like. I can explain." "Oh, you can explain?" I clicked through more photos. "Explain how you've been meeting Harry Reynolds every Thursday for months? Explain how you lie to my face about work meetings while you're at his house? Explain how you plan to do it again today, on our anniversary." The room erupted in whispers. Sarah covered her mouth in shock. Bill looked away, embarrassed. Linda's work colleagues huddled closer together, their faces a mix of horror and fascination. "I tracked every meeting," I continued, my voice rising. "Every lie, every time you texted me about running late while you were really with him. I documented everything. Because that's what you taught me, Linda, the importance of keeping accurate records." Mark stepped forward, his face red with anger. "How could you do this to Dad?" Linda reached for him, but he jerked away. Jenny was crying silently in the corner. 30 years of respect and love crumbling in real time. Would anyone like to know what Linda was doing at 2:30 today, while we were all setting up for her anniversary party? "Stop," Linda whispered, but it wasn't a command anymore. It was a plea. The room felt like it was closing in. Linda stood there, surrounded by 30 years of relationships, family, friends, colleagues, all staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disgust, her perfectly maintained world crumbling piece by piece. "You want to tell them about Harry?" I asked, my voice unnaturally calm. "Or should I? Should I tell them about his auto parts store? About how you've been his Thursday afternoon special for months now, while I'm at work, while our kids are living their lives thinking their mother is someone she's not? Dad, please. Jenny stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Maybe we should do this privately. Private? I laughed, and it sounded strange even to me. Your mother's been private enough for both of us. Private meetings, private texts, private life with her private man. Well, privacy's over now. I clicked to the next slide, a timeline I'd created. Dates, times, locations, every lie documented, every betrayal catalogued. Some of Linda's colleagues gasped when they saw the dates of her supposed client meetings. "Oh my God," Janet whispered. "The Anderson account presentation, you said you were—" "She was with Harry," I finished, "just like she was there today, while we were all here setting up her anniversary party, while her children were flying in to surprise her, while 30 years of marriage meant so little that she couldn't even keep her Thursday appointment with her lover off our anniversary." Linda finally moved, stepping toward me. "Tom, please, we can talk about this. We can—" "Talk?" I pulled out my phone. "Like how we talked this morning when you kissed me goodbye, or like how we talked when you texted that you were running late at the office. Which kind of talk would you prefer, Linda?" Mark suddenly rushed forward, his face contorted with rage. "Who is he? Where does this bastard live?" "Mark, honey, please." Linda reached for him, but he jerked away so violently she stumbled. "Don't touch me! Don't you dare touch me!" His voice cracked. "I defended you last month when Dad seemed distant, told him he needed to appreciate you more, and all this time." Sarah, Linda's best friend for 25 years, stood up. I think we should go." She grabbed her purse, not looking at Linda. "Bill?" People started moving, gathering their things, murmuring awkward excuses. The crowd that had gathered to celebrate was now dispersing like smoke, leaving Linda increasingly alone in the center of the room. "Wait," she called out, desperation creeping into her voice. "Please, let me explain. It's not what you think. Tom and we've been distant. I was lonely. I never meant—" "Lonely?" I picked up the wrapped jewelry box from the side table. "Lonely is sitting at home while your wife lies to you. Lonely is discovering your whole marriage is a fraud. Lonely is realizing the woman you've loved for 30 years doesn't exist." I unwrapped the box slowly, pulled out the diamond necklace, Linda's eyes fixed on it, fresh tears starting. "I bought this last week, wanted to make our anniversary special." I dropped the necklace on the floor between us. "Guess Harry's presence will have to do now." Jenny was sobbing openly now, supported by Mark, who looked like he wanted to break something. The remaining guests were hurrying out, some crying, others just looking shell-shocked. Janet paused at the door, turned back. "I covered for you," she said to Linda. "All those times I thought you were working late. I trusted you. We all did." The banner above us, "Happy 30th Anniversary," seemed to mock the scene below. Linda stood alone now, her perfect makeup starting to run, her carefully constructed world reduced to ashes around her. "Tom," she whispered, "what have you done?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time as my wife. "No, Linda, the question is, what have you done? To me, to our children, to 30 years of trust? That's the real surprise here, isn't it?" The house had almost emptied now. Only our children remained, standing together near the door, looking lost in their own home. The food sat untouched, the champagne warm. 30 years of marriage dying in a room full of party decorations. Linda had stopped crying. Something harder had taken over her face. "You didn't have to do it like this," she said. "You didn't have to destroy everything." Didn't I? I picked up my phone again. "Your message from this morning is still here. Can't wait for our special dinner, honey. Even today, our anniversary, you couldn't skip your date with Harry. So tell me, when exactly should I have done it? You could have talked to me. We could have worked through this." "Like you worked through it with Harry?" My voice was rising again. "Tell me, did you work through it before or after you started sleeping with him? before or after you started lying to everyone in this room?" "Stop it!" Jenny screamed suddenly. "Just stop it, both of you!" She looked between us, mascara streaked down her face. "Mom, how could you do this? And Dad, did you have to invite everyone? Did you have to make it so public?" "Your father orchestrated this," Linda said quickly. "He planned this humiliation—" "Don't you dare," Mark cut in. "Don't you dare try to make Dad the bad guy here. You did this. You threw away everything. For what? Some guy with an auto parts store?" Linda flinched like she'd been slapped. "You don't understand. Your father and we grew apart. Things weren't—" "Things weren't what, Mom?" Jenny's voice was ice cold. "Weren't exciting enough? Weren't worth fighting for? Wasn't 30 years of marriage worth at least trying to fix things?" I walked to the table, picked up my keys. Everything felt distant now, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life falling apart. "The lawyer will contact you tomorrow," I said quietly. "I'm taking the truck. You can keep the house, for now." "You're leaving?" Linda's voice cracked. "Just like that?" "No, Linda. Not just like that. After weeks of watching you lie. After seeing you today with him. After 30 years ending not with a conversation, but with you rushing home from your lover's house on our anniversary." I turned to our children. "I'm sorry you had to see this. I'm sorry for all of it. But the truth, sometimes it needs witnesses." "Where will you go?" Jenny asked, tears starting fresh. "Mike and Karen offered their guest room. I'll be okay." I looked at Linda one last time. "The diamonds are still on the floor if you want them. Consider them a parting gift. 30 years, 30 diamonds. Seems fair." I walked to the door, stopped. "Kids, I love you. That won't change. Your mother loves you too, even if she forgot how to love other things." The banner rustled in the air conditioning above us. Somewhere in the kitchen, a clock ticked loudly in the silence. 30 years of memories pressed down on us like a physical weight. "Tom," Linda said softly, "I'm sorry." I didn't turn around. "No, Linda, you're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." I opened the door. "Happy anniversary." The door closed behind me with a quiet click. In my truck, I sat for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of crying from inside the house. Then I started the engine and drove away from 30 years of my life, leaving Linda alone with her truth, her choices, and the mess of a party that was supposed to celebrate a love that didn't exist anymore. Mike and Karen's guest room felt like a hotel. Clean sheets, fresh towels, and that strange emptiness that comes with sleeping in someone else's space. I woke up early, muscle memory still set to my factory schedule, even though I'd called in sick for the week. My phone showed dozens of missed calls and messages, some from Linda, which I deleted without reading, several from Jenny and Mark, those I saved for later. The rest were from friends and family, ranging from shocked to supportive. Sarah had sent a long message about how she'd suspected something was off with Linda, but never imagined. I deleted that one too. Karen was already up when I came downstairs, making coffee, like this was just another morning. That's what I appreciated most. She didn't try to talk about it, didn't offer sympathy or advice, just handed me a cup and said, "Mike's bringing home bagels, the good ones from downtown." I sat at their kitchen counter, watching the sunrise through their window, thinking about how Linda and I used to share coffee every morning, 30 years of mornings. Now someone else was probably making her coffee, or maybe she was sitting alone in our kitchen, staring at the aftermath of last night's disaster. The lawyer called early. Apparently, news travels fast. He had an opening at 10 if I wanted to start the process. Process. Such a clean word for dismantling 3 decades of life. "You need anything?" Mike asked when he got back. "Company? A drink? Someone to punch?" I almost smiled. "Think I'm done with dramatic gestures for a while." "Fair enough." He put the bagels down. "But just so you know, I've got a friend who owns a demolition company. If you want to watch that auto parts store accidentally collapse. This time I did smile, just a little. Not because it was funny, but because it reminded me that I still could. That's the thing about destroying your life. You discover pretty quickly who's willing to help you rebuild it. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't mind. Cold coffee, borrowed bedroom, friend's kitchen. This was my new normal now. Yesterday I'd torn down 30 years of lies. Today I had to figure out what truth looked like, one cold cup of coffee at a time. The divorce papers looked strange on Mike's kitchen table, stark white legal documents next to half-empty coffee cups and bagel crumbs. My lawyer had been efficient, almost ruthlessly so. 30 years of marriage reduced to assets, accounts, and agreements. Jenny and Mark came over that afternoon. They looked tired, like they'd aged years in days. We sat in Mike's backyard, the three of us, trying to figure out what family looks like when it's been shattered and glued back together. "Mom keeps calling," Jenny said quietly. "Wants to explain her side." "She tried the same with me," Mark added. "Said it wasn't what it looked like. Said she was going to fix everything." He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Like you, can fix 30 years of lies." I watched my children, these adults who'd been forced to see their parents as real, flawed people. "You can talk to her," I said. "Should talk to her. She's still your mother." "Dad," Jenny started. "No, listen. What happened between your mother and me? That's one thing. But you two? That's different. Don't let my story become yours. Don't let her choices poison everything." Mark stood up abruptly, paced the yard. "How are you so calm about this? She cheated on you, humiliated you, lied to all of us." I thought about that. About the rage and pain that had driven me to plan that party. About how empty those feelings seemed now, like a storm that had blown itself out. "Because anger takes too much energy," I finally said, "and I'm too tired to hold on to it. Besides," I managed a small smile, "I hear the auto parts business isn't doing so well since certain photos got shared around town." Jenny gasped. Mark grinned, and for the first time since everything fell apart, we laughed together. Not because anything was funny, but because sometimes laughter is the only way to keep your heart from breaking all over again. 1 month after the party that ended my marriage, I signed a lease on a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom with a decent view and no memories. The divorce was moving along, clean and quick, like ripping off a bandage that had been holding together a wound that never really healed. I'd gone back to work, facing the awkward silences and sympathetic looks with what dignity I could muster. Funny thing about dignity, sometimes you find it in the strangest places, like in the way you hold your head up while everyone whispers about your failed marriage. Linda had moved in with her sister, or so the kids told me. Harry's business was struggling. Turns out small towns have long memories and strong opinions about men who sleep with other men's wives. I couldn't find it in me to feel bad about that. Some kinds of karma write themselves. The apartment came with a small balcony. I bought a chair, started sitting out there in the evenings, watching the sunset. Started thinking about motorcycles. Always wanted one, but Linda said they were too dangerous. Thought about traveling, about all the places I'd never seen because we were always saving for something else. Jenny and Mark visited regularly, bringing takeout and stories about their lives. We were learning to be a different kind of family, broken but honest, damaged but real. Sometimes that's better than perfect but fake. The last box from my old life sat unopened in the corner. Our wedding album, some photos, 30 years of collected moments. I'd get to it eventually, sort through what's worth keeping. But not today. Today was about watching the sunset from my new balcony, drinking beer that I picked out myself, and realizing that endings aren't always endings. Sometimes they're just different kinds of beginnings. Sometimes you have to tear everything down to see what's worth building again. And sometimes on a quiet evening in a new apartment, you find yourself smiling at the future instead of crying about the past. That's not a happy ending, but maybe it's something better. It's a real one,